guys, welcome to another episode of Coffee with Karl and Kofi. Woo, we are back for another one. I'm excited, man.
Me too, brother, man. It's been a few weeks since we've been able to bang one of these out, man. So much has happened over here
Yeah,
in Europe, man. So I've been super excited to plug in with you and the community. And here we are back for another exciting episode. And we're jumping right back into part two
of
of
Limitless.
this
Oh yeah,
review from Jim Quick.
yeah.
So many goodies, man.
Yeah. Man, so like before we jump in, I know like the audience is probably excited to hear about all the great things. I've been tapped into your experiences in Prague a bit. We've been talking a little bit. So like I don't want to skip over that because this has been a pretty cool experience for you so far. So like I would love for you to just share, man. How's the last couple of
Yeah.
weeks been?
Oh, they've been absolutely amazing. For the audience that might not be aware, I have been living in Prague, Czech Republic, for about the last month, a little over the last month or so. And if you're not up on your geography, that's basically in the heart of Europe. So it's technically referred to as Central Eastern Europe. Beautiful city, very kind people. It's a city that makes you work for it. It's largely underground, and so back in the late 1980s, Prague or Czech Republic, formerly known as Czechoslovakia, it was a communist country, so they were oppressed by the Russians, and you definitely get that feeling and that sentiment relative to how the city is laid out. There are so many things that are like literally right underneath your nose that if you don't know what you're looking for, you can just walk right by. So
So cool.
by sheer fact of that, the city has really had me grounded. It's really had me living in the present, rather than be quick to walk from point A to point B. I find myself being a lot more open to meander around
Mm.
spots and little, nooks and crannies because literally, man, like if you don't have this childlike spirit of
Mhm.
exploration and being willing to kind of see where a torturous path might go, you quite might literally miss something amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I literally remember, what was it? I think maybe like a week or a week and a half ago or so. A friend and I were invited to an event. So I'm out here doing some research for a social club concept that I'm looking to bring back to the States, but it's a whole other story. But we went to an event that this guy who does concepts put on. And I remember we left and we were looking for a spot to just have like a nice little, casual cocktail at. And we
Hmm.
were in a neighborhood. Honestly, we didn't know anything. And we just had a gut feeling that said, hey, make a left down this long corridor. You literally
Mm.
make a left down this long corridor and it just opens up to this beautiful terrace, like amazing vibe. Literally, it was like one of those things where you're like getting ready to like enter a scene of a movie where like it's quiet and then like you come from around the
Oh.
corner. It's just like that's literally what it was, man. And so that's just like a quick generic example
Yeah.
of all like the little goodies that Prague's got waiting and offering up to me out here. But beyond that, man, I'm meeting some great people. I'm having incredible conversations. People here are
Mm.
just so grateful that they have their health and that their families and their loved ones are taken care of. And
I love that.
it's just
Yeah.
really given me a greater sense of appreciation for being at this place in my life where I can do this with a great friend who's also out here building his company. And quite literally, we're just grabbing life by the horns and just going for it every single day,
Yeah.
man. And
Yeah.
allowing the flow to carry us on without being so limited in the mindset
Oh
relative
yeah.
to how it needs to look. We're really just flowing and meeting great people at every single turn, man. So
I
it
love
has
that.
been a pretty amazing journey so far.
Yeah, that's so awesome, man. Like we're
Yeah,
gonna talk about embracing the limitless mindset, but you're embracing a limitless lifestyle right now, which
I
is
am.
absolutely awesome. And like, I think it's you can learn so many things when you take yourself out of like an environment where you're, used to seeing everything, you're used to your routine and just having to change like
Right.
completely flip everything. Like you're in a time zone that's 12 hours away from where you're originally from. Talking about flipping the script, like you really have to make adjustments and you have to
Yeah.
be really used to like a growth mindset in order to do those things and succeed. So I love it, man. Yeah.
Absolutely, bro. Yeah. You definitely can't be overly tethered to how you are used to or
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with things in the past. Um,
Yeah.
something as simple as taking public transportation, right? Or
Mhm.
something as simple as sort of becoming familiar with walking 45 minutes and that being actually a walk on the lighter side of things, right? Versus hopping in a car and driving around, or, becoming familiar with the new cultural norms, language, body
Mm.
language that's a little bit different. And just being, comfortable being uncomfortable in these situations has really taught me to just kind of become comfortable in my own skin. And
Yeah.
this is it's been coming up quite a bit as I've been talking with some of my neurocheck friends. One of the things that I really admire about them is they seem to really embrace their individuality and how they feel in the moment. So let me give you
Mm.
an example. It's not uncommon to go to a coffee shop, ask for a coffee, make casual conversation where you're like, hey, like, how's your day going? And have somebody tell you, oh, it's actually not so good. Like, like they're very transparent, right? They'll be like, oh, it's not
Mm.
such a good day. And I'm like, oh, like, wow, like, tell me why. And then like we get into a little conversation about it. Like in the States, I feel like somebody asks you how you're doing and, what are you conditioned to respond? Oh,
Good.
great,
Yeah.
fine, amazing, and there
Yeah.
might be something underlying happening there. So it's taught me
I
that it
like
is
that. Yeah.
totally acceptable to embrace all parts of yourself, which
Mm.
again, I think is a limitless way to live versus
Yeah.
putting yourself into this cubby of, oh, I'm great, I'm fine, because that's how we've been programmed to respond, or
Mhm.
that's the facade we want to give off, which actually limits our ability to go further with people and have true
Yeah.
human connection and interaction. So yeah, man.
Absolutely. And that is so real. Like, because I realized that even in my own life, like I used to do have that same type of automatic response, like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm great. I'm fantastic, despite, what was going on. And I realized that in a way, like I was almost diminishing my ability to be fully authentic and actually, experience or like acknowledge that other side that said, hey,
Yep.
I could still be a happy individual and have a bad day. I could still be an
Yep.
overly positive person and still, have a day and just have something that I'm going through that I might want to share. So that's so
Yeah.
real. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, man, let's dive into this because this
Let's
book
get
is
into it.
absolutely amazing. And there's like, for you guys who don't know, again, Limitless by Jim Quick. Like Karl and I
Yep.
started diving into this, and there's so many just great nuggets to just live a truly fulfilling life. So one thing that really I just thought was like, I don't know, pretty like I feel like a lot of these things in this book, like I have a like kind of a knowledge of, but like to bring the awareness to the table and be like, okay, like this is like these are like actual concepts that are impacting people's lives and not allow them to live limitless and are limitless. And the first thing that he kind of goes through is the four horsemen. So I want
Yep.
to, first kind of focus on that right there because I found though, like I think everyone should absolutely know about these. So the first horseman he talks about is digital deluge.
Mm.
And man, this is I find this so prevalent in my life and a lot of the lives of people that I interact with. And for those of you who don't know, digital deluge is essentially the fact that we consume more data today than someone consumed in the 1400s in their entire lifetime. Like we have
Right.
so much access to information nowadays. There's so like, I mean, we're on this, we're recording a podcast. There's thousands of podcasts being, launched every single day. You work for a podcast company. I know you see the media side. You have social media, you have news, you have all these different ways of receiving information. And
Right.
the reality of that is that, like, just like anything else, like, this huge, massive influx and availability of information, like we have to know that can be a good thing, but it can also be a good bad thing as well.
Right. Right. And access to information has never been, more accessible, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
ability to basically go, hey, what is this song playing? And then hold up our phone
Yeah.
as he, does whatever she does is in and of itself a tremendous convenience in terms of closing the gap relative to a question or an open loop that we currently have in our mind. But I
Mm-hmm.
think where the author, where Quick is basically making, a strong stance for how this is potentially very limiting in our ability to, you know,
Mhm.
master our mindset, put it that way, is we sort of lose the ability, right? Like when things are just easily available to kind of like consume, we sort of lose the ability to really work that muscle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And be able to
Critical thinking.
solve
Yeah.
things on our own. This is one of the reasons why, even though I use AI a little bit, Chat GPT, that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, I am a little bit cautious about it. Like I'll literally ask myself before I go to Chat GPT, like, is this something that could be inhibiting my natural ability to problem solve or to leverage critical thinking skills
Mm.
that are so
Mhm.
important, right? Or or is this something that, yeah, whatever, it's fine to go to AI real quick because it'll at least give me sort of the impetus for some ideas that I can build off of
Yeah.
using my own critical thinking abilities. And with information just being right there at our fingertips, it starts to desensitize if we're not careful, if we don't ask ourselves that question, such as I asked myself. And that's just, in my lived experience, but it can really desensitize our ability to just think for ourselves and operate.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that can put us into a situation where we start to shortchange ourselves, right? We start acting more self-limiting because we feel like we do not have the propensity to answer a question, and technology, AI, what have you, is far more
Absolutely.
capable in our minds to take care of it for us. But what happens when these technologies aren't as available one day? What
Hmm.
happens when the inputs of these technologies may become skewed or compromised, whatever the case may be? And I think that's where we possibly find ourselves in a precarious situation. So I think it's
Absolutely.
important that we find a way to collaborate with, ease and access of digital information while still maintaining some sort of autonomy and keeping ourselves in the driver's seat there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so necessary. So there's this concept that I learned years ago called learned helplessness.
Yep.
So we actually like if we because like we're creatures of habit. That's the reality of our brains. Like everything we do multiple times, we get better at doing, and the things we don't do, we get worse at doing just naturally. If you don't use it, you lose it. So
Right.
learned helplessness is like essentially like, because things are so like readily available, there's so much access to all these things, like we actually learn to be helpless. So as you said, when that like phone isn't available, like look how many people freak out.
Right.
Like when your phone runs out of battery, like when something happens and you don't have access, like you start to think that like, oh my God, like the reason why I was able to do this is because of this thing, not because of myself. And we start to give away a lot of the power that we do have internally to a lot of these external things. And I know like I think for me, like it didn't, my most recent example that I can think of, it wasn't actually with technology, but kind of this like over reliance on something external happened when like with coaches and like with mentors in the past. And I remember
Yeah.
for me, like I remember years ago, I was working with a coach mentor, and the relationship had gotten like really deep. It was amazing. And like I was able to achieve a lot of things while I was in relationship with him. And again, I'm extremely thankful for the time that we spent together. But because it started to create like a bit of a codependent relationship, I started to rely on the skills
Right.
and knowledge of that person a little bit too much. I started to like doubt my ability to even go out and succeed and problem solve without like getting a second opinion. Like I was
Or
always like, man, like I have to ask for help, or I have to see what to go do in this situation. And not realizing that like there are plenty of problems I had solved in the past. There are plenty of things that I had done, and like if you have the ability to solve that problem, it's better
yeah.
that you exercise that muscle instead of like outsourcing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying, oh my God, like, let me ask for help, but let me do something. So technology does that same exact thing. Like, and what it leads to, like in the book, he talks about like memory fog and like, just overall like, you know, uh fatigue, just mentally, just like your brain's ability to really solve and attack these problems just
Mhm.
decreases, overall. So I think that's just like, the more we can really exercise our sense of autonomy
Yeah.
and really, allow ourselves to even struggle a bit through a
Yeah.
problem.
Absolutely,
A good thing.
absolutely. And I think this is a great segue into maybe some practical suggestions that we can
Mm-hmm.
offer for the listeners out there. You know, part of how I think about this is introducing suffering into my life
Mm.
just a little
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things right now that is kind of a big, topic of interest, it would be like DoorDash, some of these different food delivery
Yeah.
services out
Yeah.
there. Our company actually did a little expose with one of our clients, basically showing how some of these services are, driving Americans towards the poorhouse much quicker or at greater rates than a lot of other things right now from a consumer
Facts.
debt perspective. And that's a whole nother topic in and of
Yeah.
itself. You have food, you have random, consumer product goods, all these different things
Netflix, you
being
like,
delivered
yeah.
instantly, right? And it is literally unteaching or unlearning. There's an unlearning happening right now in terms of our ability to suffer and our ability
Yeah.
to, withstand the amount of time that it takes to hop in the car, go out and find a way to get the
Mm-hmm.
thing that you need. And so for me, I will go through periods of time, and this is just a way that I practically keep myself plugged in, where I fast, and there's a number of scientific based reasons as to why fasting will help you. One of the reasons is fasting can kind of cut back on some of that brain or some of that mental fatigue. But if you do it long enough, you actually find yourself in states where you're really plugged in and you're kind of operating off of a primal mindset. And it's in some of these moments for me personally where I find that I'm just afforded an opportunity, quite frankly, to sharpen the mind and
Yeah.
become a little detached from, the inclination or the desire to
Mm-hmm.
grab the phone and do the quick thing, right? And
Yeah.
so something like that, I think, is a great example that the audience can take away. I think being able to step away from your phone for periods of it at a time, and I'm not saying like just leave it in the other room. One of the reasons why I love it out here is I will actually just leave my phone in my flat. And I'll say, you know what? I'm gonna go run a 45-minute errand. It's a 45-minute walk there, 10, 45 minutes walk back, and I'll just use this as an opportunity to look around and be perceptive relative to what's in my environment. And I think it's a little bit easier out here because everything's new and shiny to me, but I'm not as distracted by the phone. I'm not as reliant on Google Maps to get me to and fro. I have to
Yeah.
actually be mindful of different landmarks that I can use as indicators relative to where I might be. And so
And
that's
I
been a
love
great
that.
weeding
That's
process for
mhm.
me. Like
Yeah.
even Google Maps, literally, that's a great example. I know so many people, I'm from Denver originally. I know so many people that will just turn on Google Maps in Denver, even though they've been living there for 5.5, 6 years, just because they're overly dependent on the maps
Mm.
being available, or they want to be able to try to like predict where traffic might be versus allowing flow to drive in the way that they're going to go, find that traffic has come, and then use their mind in the real time to navigate around it, right? And so these are little opportunities that we can give ourselves or that we can
Mm-hmm.
take back to counteract what Quick is talking about here relative to the digital deluge.
Absolutely. That's yeah, those are so great. And one thing I love about the examples that you gave is it reminds like yourself and your brain that you can handle. the
Yeah.
suffering. Like I feel like,
Yes.
like if we're desensitizing ourselves too much, we start to forget that, like, if you have to do a little bit of mental math, that's another great way to, exercise your brain. Like next time you have to, maybe calculate a tip or,
Yep.
do some math to add up a couple numbers, do that mentally. But it
Yeah.
reminds you that you can handle that. Like I feel like a lot of times, like, I mean, I'm trying to think of, like, a great example here. Um, so DoorDash, right? Like a lot of people, that have been used to DoorDash, they may be like, hey, like I just don't have the time, or like, going out to the grocery store is too stressful. And we start to like forget that we have the tools and we're able to do these things, and we were doing them years before.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just really, like, I feel like it's very difficult if you're not constantly adding in some type of suffering throughout your day to like go out and then conquer bigger challenges. Like you really just start to develop this mindset where you're just very, for lack of a better term, like weak. It's just you're just not
Yeah.
able to really muster up the strength or courage to go out there and, conquer new things in life. So
Absolutely, bro.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
moving on to the next horseman here. The next horseman is digital distraction. So this one, oh my gosh, is so real. I know I've experienced digital distraction many times. And it talks about how our phones like truly affect our relationships. And even now, like as we're talking, like I'm looking at my phone for my notes and everything like that.
Okay.
I think it could be very distracting. But like, we have to be aware and conscious of the fact that phones do affect relationships. Like if you go on a date and you're like utilizing your phone, like there are plenty of studies out there that say that, like, hey, like the connection felt between you and that other person isn't nearly going to be as strong if one person has their phone open while you guys are, having a connection or, spending that time together. And we used to really just not have that be present. Like you imagine nowadays, like I think one thing is really cool. Like I'll go outside and sometimes I'll just like be walking around, people watching, and well, it's cool, but also kind of scary. But you see a lot of people and they just like walk around like zombies, just like having their
Yeah.
phones in their hands. And
Yeah.
like because we've grown so used to just having these devices, like we are constantly have the need to always distract ourselves. Like I
Yeah.
I've been guilty of it. Like I go to the DMV and I'm in line. I'm like, okay, I gotta use my phone or I gotta do this thing. And it's just like
Right.
the ability to just be present
Yeah.
has become so lost in society. And like that is like it's and like in my life, like where I've seen that really come to fruition is like if I'm constantly using my phone and I like have like a lot of screen time, like I realize that like it's hard. I'm gonna experience a lot more anxiety. Like I'm always gonna be thinking about something because I'm constantly just used to some type of input coming into my brain.
Right.
So it's just so apparent the uh mental impacts of just like always being distracted and always having to be stimulated in some way. And that's what our phones are designed to do. It's just like,
Absolutely. Man, this is definitely one that I've struggled with. I
mhm.
think part of me, growing up used to think that being the guy walking and talking or walking and texting was kind of cool because I was giving off this energy like I'm just too busy and too cool for school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But but again, and this is going to sound like just a huge commercial for pick up and move to Europe. One of the things, and I just got to be transparent, one of the things that I've noticed is that the Europeans, not that they don't use cell phones, of course they do, but I've been watching their interactions with their peers, their counterparts. They are incredibly present
Mm.
and focused on the moment of who they are spending time with. Like, I seldom ever see two people sat at a coffee table or a dinner table just distracted in the phone. Think about how often
Yeah.
you see that in America. One of the things I love to do in America when I do go out to a restaurant is like I like to just kind of people watch and
Yeah. Yeah.
observe. Like that actually is a great way to kind of put the phone away and just, be a little bit more perceptive,
Mhm.
tapped in with what's going on around you. And it always makes me cringe to death when I see like a guy and a woman just sitting there, not talking, food's there, drinks are there, and they're just both in their screens. And it's like, all right, like, are we on a terrible first or second date? Or is there something just far much more entertaining than actually being able to conversate and connect with each other? But here, you can really tell that people are like getting lost in each other's eyes.
Yeah.
Why I know, because I've been in some of these conversations as of late where like somebody's like truly looking at me, and it's making me feel so seen. It's making me feel so heard that I've now made this bet that I want to try to pay that forward with each and every individual that I come into contact with. So my new bet with myself to try to ward off this digital distraction thing is whenever I walk through a threshold, like it's my new game. Like let's say like I'm, walking from the street into a restaurant or walking from the street into a store. I try to be mindful of, okay, you are getting ready to cross the chasm, right? You are now getting ready to go into a closed container, a closed space of other people that you might have an opportunity to have some level of interaction with. But you can only be able to do that if the phone is away and in the pocket. And
Yeah.
so now it's something that I've just begun to be a little bit more mindful of. I actually caught myself, I think it might have been earlier today, walking into a space and I had the phone in the hand and I was able to kind of catch it as soon as I crossed. So I just offer that up as an example of something that we can do to sort of pair a new behavior of, okay, walking into a space, let me put the phone away, as a way to be more conscious of when it's actually happening to us, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen that guy or that girl just like so lost in the phone walking down the sidewalk, they almost like bump into us, they bump into like a light pole, and it like nothing's more embarrassing. So
Yeah. And
if
it's
nothing else, do yourself a favor and don't be that man or that woman that's just so lost in your screen that like you're literally walking out into traffic, putting your life at harm's way.
right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Talk about, driving with your phone and all these things. And, I think like great ways because like I've noticed that like as when I use my phone less, like I actually have a higher quality of life. Like I really feel better mentally, I feel better physically. And because our phones are literally like, the epitome, perfect example of like just distracting technology. Like that's what they're meant to do to
Right.
allow us to use our attention, or to, make sure that we're attentive and we're focusing on it. Like, have times in your day, like great ways to like, I guess, avoid this or to have times in your day where you don't have phone time. Like have times in your day where you're just like, hey, like I'm just going to go out and take a walk and maybe just bring a book or bring a journal. For me, a lot of ways that I help myself to make sure that I'm not just like training that distraction muscle in my brain, because that thing is real. If you are constantly, especially if you're making content and you're on social medias, it's so easy to just like always be like stimulated in some way. Is meditation. Like I typically will spend around, usually 20 to 40 minutes a day meditating. And that is like if nothing else, that's the one time in my day where I'm just like focused. I'm just like trying to sit there and focus on like just my breath. I'm trying to sit there and focus. Maybe it's transcendental meditation. I'm like focusing on like a mantra, but really just like, removing all the thoughts, or, like really not allowing those different things that may be coming up to, take over my mind and just being there and sitting with myself. And that's such a powerful thing because like, it's really hard to be like fulfilled and happy with your life in the present if you never pay attention to it.
Yep.
If you're
Absolutely.
always sitting there looking in a different direction, like how can you ever be happy with what you have in front of you?
Not only that, bro. I mean, we were talking offline before we started recording, and you were, graciously sharing about
Mm-hmm.
you had with a young lady where things didn't quite work out the way that you
Mm-hmm.
had. And I think that's like another piece of it, right? Like
Mm.
times in interpersonal relationships, we over index on how things have to go, right? Like we start
Mm.
this mind frame of how the relationship is going to progress. What I'm
Yeah.
always
Oh yeah.
something I'm always, I'll put myself on the spot. Like will be preparing to go meet a woman for a drink or whatever, and I'll kind of start rehearsing how like the first 2 to 4 minutes, that's kind of like the critical zone for like in my mind setting the tone of the date. Like I'll
Yeah.
start what I'm gonna say, how I want to kind of like create a mood and a vibe. And I think, from an perspective, there's nothing wrong with wanting to kind of like put your best foot forward and
Yeah,
wanting
absolutely.
being intentional about that. But there are definitely times where I feel a little over indexed on
Mm,
cursing. And then
yeah.
into the actual physical interaction, it feels like a little like I'm short circuiting and I'm trying to like deliver this thing that quite frankly is limiting our interaction versus me just coming in, taking space, taking a breath, and
Yeah.
allowing it to come up. Like that is a way to be more limitless. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that really goes back to, being there in that present moment. And like, as I was sharing, just to kind of, go through the story, like I ended up, I was hanging out with in like a group of friends with this girl, right? We end up, having a great time. We were gonna go on a date and everything. And in my mind, I sat there and I was like, I told myself this narrative. I wasn't being present. I told myself this narrative of how things were gonna go, how, all the great things that were gonna happen down the road. And it didn't end up going the way I wanted to. She was like, hey, like I'm actually, getting out of a situationship with someone else right now. And so I was like real defeated because I had sat there very distractedly, played out all these different steps in my mind instead of just being present in the moment and just, kind of taking things as they came. And what I realized is that, like, yeah, the things that we do throughout the day, all the habits that we have, being on our phone, being distracted, you know, um, maybe like not being present in the moment constantly, like all those different things can really take us out from like what the reality is that we're currently experiencing. And it's just so valuable. Like, of course, we're going to have times where we're like either thinking about the past or thinking about the future, but to be able to spend the majority of your time like in the present is such like an amazing space. Like, and I know when I'm able to bring myself back to the present, I'm like, hey, like I'm sitting here, having amazing conversations with one of my best friends, and this moment is like amazing. Like that's where life really happens, not in the past and not in the present. So
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for sharing that, bro. I think that's one that the audience can definitely connect with. And at the end of the day, guys, we're not just here to sort of regurgitate what these books
mhm.
are sharing from a theoretical perspective. We are here to try to interweave it back into our lives and the
Yeah.
things that he and I are both experiencing as two young men, navigating
Mhm.
this big, beautiful earth, trying to get better each single step of the way. And so, speaking of getting better, there are two more. There are two more four horsemen that I think we can quickly touch on for the
Yeah.
audience. I just want to bring it back to the seven limitless mindsets that I think we can
Ooh.
walk through people just to be able to give them some tools that they can lean into to try to get themselves
Mhm.
in a state of equilibrium. If
Yeah,
they
yeah,
feel
yeah. Yeah, let's do this. Let's
for horsemen that they're over it.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love
So
this.
I think the two others, and we've kind of already covered these, Kof,
Yeah, digital dementia.
dementia and digital deduction. And I
Yeah.
think we've spoken about that, like digital dementia, sort of like an over reliance on
Mhm.
technology. I think the perfect example here is the GPS thing.
Yeah.
Like, your city of Richmond, but you hop in the car, you throw in the GPS because you tell yourself that there might be a quicker way. You know what I mean? Versus just figuring out in real time. So maybe, the best action step there, if that's you, is next time you hop in the car, resist the urge to throw on the GPS and listen to a
Mhm.
podcast. Listen to Coffee and Karl with Kofi, shameless plug. Yeah, the last one is the digital deduction, right? And so that kind of speaks to what we were talking about when we introduced this concept of the four horsemen. And that's just the ease and of which information is accessible, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Google, all the answers are right there. And with being able to use tools like Google or use services like DoorDash, it sort of just leads to a natural state of erosion of our critical thinking and natural problem solving skills. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
something that I think we should all think about, I want you to chime in here, is this whole AI thing. Like, I'm literally taking 3 seconds to ask myself, is this something that I could just spend a little bit more time fine tuning my critical skills or my problem solving skills on? Or do I have to actually use the AI just to like propagate kind of like, a list of where to start that I can then plug the critical thinking skills on versus
Yeah.
just typing in
Yeah.
whatever it is type in. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And there's one example here that I want to just, share before we move on. Like with the digital deduction, I think one thing that's so important there is to realize like, if you have an idea or an opinion, you can always find information that's backing that thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that thing is true. Like actually a couple maybe about a week ago, I had an experience with like a good friend, and I love people for who they are. I have no judgments, but like he can be a little bit of what is the word I'm thinking of, conspiracy theorist. Oh, just a tad, just a tad bit. And so
Uh,
like we just got into this conversation. We were diving deep again. I love him, bro. But like he starts like kind of diving into this like certain, I forgot, I think it was something regarding, I don't know, America or Russia, all the things, right? And he's like pulling up all these articles and all these different things and sharing them with me. And I'm like this is cool, all these things. But like one thing that's important to really realize here is that like, there's a lot of ideas out there. And there's a lot of information supporting those ideas, but it's so important to like not necessarily just find something that's like backing your thought or your idea, because you can do that endlessly, but to actually critically think and say, like, actually analyze this thing and say, all right, like, what are the facts and what are the like, falsehoods that I can find on this subject? Let me gather these together, look at like a full list, and then let me make my decision based off like the information that I've found, not necessarily just like going and finding the first person that agrees with your thing and then they wrote an entire
yeah,
opinionated article on this. Like it's so important to like use our critical thinking skills and then
right.
also draw from our own experiences too, like because oftentimes like we may have experienced something in life that may be similar to that, and we can draw from that experience instead of always like taking from someone else's experiences in life. So don't discount your own experience, your own ability to go out there and find the truth at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And what I'm also hearing you say is like, hey, listen, if you carry an emotional charge, like your friend, the conspiracy theorist, about something being one way, at a minimum, try to be self-aware of the fact that you probably have a confirmation bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
To seek out a piece of information that likely supports your hunch or
Yeah.
you're speculative of, right? And so I think this actually creates a natural bridge to
Mm-hmm.
the 7 key takeaways around how we can have limitless mindsets. And the first is curiosity. I mean, literally,
Yes.
curiosity. In my mind, it's just a strong desire to want to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
So your friend that feels convicted about this conspiracy theory being true, well, how can you prove something is true? You can prove something is true by taking a look at areas that are false relative to that thing, right? So how do you keep your curiosity at a peak state to where you go, I wonder what would make this thing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And actually like go out and seek sources that show that this conspiracy theory is wrong. And then to what you were saying, at the end of the day, you've got your own ability to critically think. You've got your own ability to use discernment and judgment for your own self. Look at evidence that is counter to your position and then try to create a case and then ultimately support a case that
Yeah.
prove that from your point of view, this thing is true. And I think in order to actually do that, and it takes some work, you need curiosity to sort of fuel that path going forward.
Absolutely. And curiosity has been something in my life that has truly been like a huge factor in all the results and all the outcomes that I live today. Like, I think that we have like lost a bit of curiosity in our society. Like we oftentimes, don't feel the energy or don't have the motivation to, find the answer. But, being truly curious about things is so powerful. And going out and like seeking your own truth, going out there and reading books and listening to podcasts on new things. And if something comes up that's challenging that you've never faced before, don't give yourself an out and say, man, like I can't learn this, or I don't have the ability to understand this. Maybe start just like digesting it just a little bit, find a place to start. Like say, for example, if you, I don't know, want to go build a car, right? Maybe
Right.
go understand how a wheel is built. How a wheel works. Like understand like a small portion of it. You don't have to take over this, take this thing as a whole and be overwhelmed. But when you can be curious and like then create some small intentional steps to start learning something, like you'd be so surprised at how months and years of that applied philosophy, where that'll get you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the last thing I'll say on this is it's about keeping your brain actively engaged.
Yeah.
Like a small child,
Mm-hmm.
you'll, okay, a car has four wheels. Why? Why do I have four wheels, right? You answer that, and then it leads to another question. Why? Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't be afraid to ask why.
Yeah.
I think you've just sort of gotten some sort of weird, lazy brain that doesn't want to ask another question. And if you think about it, questions really drive communication. I tell all my friends the single most biggest problem with communication is the assumption that it happened. Said another,
Mm-hmm.
I can communicate something with you, Kofi. Hey, Kofi, this thing hurts my feelings. And you can just take that at face value. But what you fail to realize is that you don't actually understand what I mean by feelings. Well, what do you mean hurt your feelings, Karl? Oh, well, when I was younger, X, Y, and Z said such a thing, and it makes me feel this type of way when it comes up again. And so now you have a greater level of context, like, oh wow, like Karl suffered this hurt that is
Mm-hmm.
attached. So now you have a greater understanding of what's actually going on, right? Versus just leaving it at a face value. And that leads to the second point, which is clarity. Like, be willing to actually gain a true level of understanding. It's
Yes. Yeah.
a fundamental level of awareness as to why a thing is the way that it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think from a perspective, if you want to be someone that is quote unquote limitless, you need clarity of what your goals are, right? You need to ultimately understand what your why is. Like, why are you doing and setting out after the thing that you're going after,
Mm-hmm.
right? And ultimately, when the pain or when the discomfort comes around your intended path, right? Rather than succumb, rather than be limited by that temporary pain that feels like an absolute blocker, right? Between you and where it is you're looking to go, you're going to be able to remember that why, right? You're going to be able to remember that clarifying question that should be greater than whatever that barrier is to keep you along your path, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely. And another thing I really love on clarity is that it's so important to have clarity to understand what your next move is. Like that's something that I tell to my clients, all the time, right? Like it is important that we understand where we are going so we know if we're on track or off track. Like there's a great quote, like the wind favors the man who sets his sails. And
Mm.
you will be a lot more aware of if you're not going in the right direction or if you are going in the right direction, if you have a good idea as to where you actually need to get to and what your desired outcome is at the end of the day. And that's the one thing that I truly love about like really, spending more time. That's something I need to even do more. I'm going to do it more today, actually, just spending more time, getting more clear on like what my outcomes are for the different things that I'm doing in life. Because it also, as you mentioned, it helps you get through the mud too. because when you're like really, when you're like, hey, like for example, when I was a competitive powerlifter, my goal was to, break a state record, right? And, I would get into the gym and have good days, but then I'd get into the gym and have bad days, right? I may not lift the weight that I actually want to lift, or I may, end up slightly injuring myself or something along those lines. And it would have been so easy to throw in the towel if I didn't have like that set defined goal and like a date that I actually wanted to complete it, because I would have just been going and been like, man, like this kind of sucks. I don't like sitting here with my back hurt. Can't really do much. Like, oh man, like I'm feel a little defeated because I, hit the same weight I did last week. But when I was clear on that goal, I was able to say, okay, like this is just like a bit of a speed bump. This is just like, a slight slowdown. But ultimately I need to go there. So I know that like what I need to do is, if I'm injured, I need to focus on my recovery. I need to do the things that are good for my body in order to, make sure I'm able to get back to where I was. And then in a week or 2 weeks, I'm going to be back in the gym doing this workout to now make sure that, I'm continuing to establish that good foundation, that form, and ultimately reaching my goal. So like, that is one thing that I see that oftentimes it kind of goes back to the distraction that we always have, that we don't spend enough time really thinking about where we want to go and having that clarity.
Yeah, and how these challenges, such as what you just described, are ultimately a pathway helping us to move forward. You
Yeah.
know, challenge, and that's actually one of the seven principles here that we're discussing. You can look at a challenge from one of two ways. You can look at
Mm-hmm.
it from the victim mindset, and that is, man, this thing came out of nowhere. It's an act of God. I'm being punished.
Yeah.
I need fourth grade. I'm now sidelined.
Yeah.
Forget that mission. Forget that why. Forget that goal. Right. And just basically relegate yourself to the things that happen in life, such as the
Mm-hmm.
man that his sails, right? Like he just basically said, oh, like I'll just kind of end up whichever way the wind pushes me. Or you can say, you know what, a storm is coming. I know that it is, and I'm going to prepare right now, right? And I'm going to do everything that I can in my power to look at this as an opportunity to get better,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because and that this certainly probably won't be the last speed bump in life. So
Yeah.
why get myself to these adversities that come that can just push me whichever intended direction that they want to take me? And why not use this as an opportunity to prepare for future adversities that are coming? Because this certainly won't be the last one. And I now have an opportunity to go toe to toe with this thing and ensure that I'm going to be able to come out not only above and beyond this thing, a better, stronger person, more capable person, but that's now a deposit. That's now a deposit in my ability to prove to myself that I can overcome challenges. And thinking that way, being able to approach problems that way is a limitless way to live, because
Mm-hmm.
we know that at the end of the day, you have the power of choice. And that is
Absolutely.
incredible, bro. Like that,
Yeah.
that's one of the,
Very empowering.
especially along this path of building a business and doing it bootstrapped. We face the challenge, we face the challenges of cash flow, and we're growing, but it takes money to grow. And at times it feels really overwhelming. But something that really keeps me poised, Kofi,
Mm.
the thing that really keeps me poised as we continue to do this bootstrap game is knowing that I'm going to come out on the other end with the skills, the knowledge, and the practical experience to be able to show others how to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Um,
Many people tell themselves that they can't go after their dreams because it requires a business, and a business requires money, and they don't have any investors, or they don't
Mm-hmm.
have, like, it's this whole it's this vicious cycle of just not getting off the couch to do the thing. And one of the things that really excites me literally is being able to stand on a stage one day facing brave souls that say that they want to go into entrepreneurship or business, saying that they want to disrupt the world for making it a better place. and be able to look them in the eye and say, hey, here's how we went from 0 to 8 figures completely bootstrapped. Now, it's not going to be easy. There are going to be very many days that come where you're just like, whoa, like where did that haymaker sandwich come from? But I'm telling you, if I could do it, and I'm going to show you how I do it, you can too. So put the excuses off to the side and look at every single individual challenge that comes your way as an opportunity to forge your path, knowing that this man here in front of you did the same thing. Like that quite literally is something that I imagine that makes the little challenges so worthwhile, to where I
Yeah.
actually look at them like they're my friends, they're not foes. And I, again, limitless mindset. So you can see the energy
Hmm.
getting here, man. I mean, these are the little things that we need to kind of be able to like cling on to give ourselves little mental tune-ups, so that when these things come and they want to thwart us or threaten us, we can go, not me today. You just duck and weave.
Yeah, exactly. Juking it. I love that. And that's such a powerful mindset. Like your relationship with challenges are so critical to your ultimate success, down the road. And I realized like a couple years ago, I started to reframe like how I experience challenges, because the reality of like, when we face something that's challenging, right? Like we tend to have this like visceral response, like, oh my God, like fight or flight. Like that's like we're gonna try to run away from it, or we're gonna try to like fight it. And we just have this aversion to embracing it. But that fight or flight response was like born from the fact that like we evolved to see a challenge as like a mortal danger. Like back when our whole system evolved for these, like we were like used to seeing a bear, or we were used to seeing a lion, and then getting that same response and be like, oh my God, this is what I need to do to survive. But then when we're presented with that same challenge nowadays, like 90% of the time, if you're living in a developed country, that challenge you're facing is not going to be a mortal danger. And it's to be able to change your outlook on that and saying, hey, like, oh my God, like I have this experience with this girl, or I'm facing this challenge in my business, or like I just realized I have to change my health in this way. And seeing that as something as like, hey, like this is going to be difficult, but like it's not going to kill me, and this is only going to like refine me, make me stronger, and it's allowing me to get to a next stage, is completely different, because it's not as scary as seeing a lion. But we feel the same way, but like it's not, I guess it's not as much of a danger. And you can still approach those challenges with that growth mindset, as you mentioned. I love that. Just like going out there, embracing it and saying, hey, these things are here to build me up, to help me become that person I ultimately need to be.
And ultimately, what it's doing is that it's instilling confidence in you.
Mm-hmm.
And confidence is this thing that is often seen as something that's external, right? Like you somehow are fortunate enough to tap into a well of confidence that doesn't somehow live within you. When really, I feel like it's something that's cultivated, and it's ultimately cultivated by running toward these challenges that, again, I
Yeah.
call, and using them as small quizzes or exams, however you want to frame it, to prove that you can come out standing tall. And that way, when the next one comes, as I said on the last segment, you can remind yourself of that last exam that you passed. I mean, I know that you've
Mm-hmm.
been through adversity. You and I have spent a lot of time. I know that you know that I've been through a lot of
Yeah.
adversity. I'm willing to bet everything that I have that when you and I are going toe to toe with whatever it is we're probably going toe to toe with right now, yes, fear comes up,
Mm-hmm.
but consciously put that aside. We say, thank you, but no thanks. This isn't a big, bad, scary lion in the Serengeti coming to get me. It's not going to kill me. And then we remind ourselves of a time in the past where we felt a similar type response, where we were able to relegate it and we were able to push forward because we knew
Mm-hmm.
that also going to make us better. And that's where this confidence comes from. People say, Karl, like, how are you so confident, man? You just like, dude, I do hard things every single day.
Yeah.
Literally.
Facts.
And I'm having to make a difficult decision. I'm having to have a difficult, uncomfortable conversation. I'm having to problem solve without AI, sometimes with AI.
Mm-hmm.
you know, podcasts are like, okay, like I got to prepare for these. I'm having to travel to meet people. Like, there's something every day should be somewhat uncomfortable. And I think when you're over indexed on comfort, that's where the confidence starts to wane. So if you're struggling
Absolutely.
with confidence and you're a guy listening to this and you're like, I can't seem to find a date to save my life. Are you maybe swiping a little too much? Is that a little
Hmm.
overeating? Maybe that needs to be relegated. You know, if you're a woman listening to this right now, you're like, oh man, I can't seem to find the confidence to feel good in my own skin or blah 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 blah. Are you on Instagram looking at all these models and kind of living a life through their lens or through what it is that they put out versus finding and reconnecting with the beauty that you have within and leaning into some of the things that maybe make you uniquely beautiful and doing the
Hmm.
self that's required, albeit hard work, but the self work that's required to make you feel more comfortable in your skin so that you can walk out as the beautiful dominant that you are. So these are the things, right? These are the things you ultimately need that resistance to ultimately be able to have, this sort of experience that one would call confidence, which is basically just a belief in oneself and a belief in one's ability to do the difficult thing
Hmm.
extended periods of time to ultimately master it and be able to, come out as
Yeah.
one seems like a sensei, basically.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's two big things that I've learned about confidence that have truly helped me out. And that's one you mentioned there, like, pay attention to your track record. Like that is ultimately going to determine your future confidence. And if you are, my problem in the past was I used to like overpromise things. Like I used to be like, okay, or like overcommit myself. I used to be like, hey, I'm gonna do like 30 things in this day. I'm gonna get them all done. The end of the day would come and I'd have like one or two things done. And I'd be like, man, like I must be a failure because I'm not living up to my standard. So start off with like small things you may do. It may be like making your bed, having like a morning routine with like two or three different things that you do, but like really keeping the promises to yourself, because that's where a lot of your confidence is going to come from. You being confident that you can actually get that thing done that you're now challenged with or you're now faced with. And if you have been like constantly making promises to yourself in the past and not doing any of them, like it's going to be very difficult to be like, wow, I really think I can get this done, because your track record isn't going to show that. So it doesn't mean you necessarily have to like, set the bar extremely high. In fact, like if you're struggling with confidence, start setting the ball a little bit lower. Like, and start off with, small promises you can make to yourself and then continue to build those over time. But really start there so you can start giving yourself the mindset. You can start realizing, hey, you are capable of, getting things done. And then another piece on that I learned is actually comes down to the um etymology, is that the right word? Of confidence. Etymology, so like the actual breakdown of like the word confidence. And if you look at confidence, you see right? So whenever you see in a word, it means that there's two people need to be necessary for that, like codependent, community, confidence, right? So confident, you're not just going to be self-confident just only focusing on yourself. You actually are become confident by in community, when you realize that, hey, in this community, I now have the capabilities to help someone out or do something. So another thing that I started to do when I was low on self-confidence is I would like find someone I can help out. And maybe a client, I may be talking to them and educating them on some new financial concept or helping them through a situation, or maybe me like, just, giving someone advice. But it's pretty hard to be, have low self-confidence when you're actually helping someone out. So be more engaged in your community, find more ways you can help and serve others. And you'd be surprised at how much your confidence increases just from, that, doing those things for other people outside of yourself.
Love that etymology, man. Words are a beautiful thing, aren't
They
they?
are.
There's such, especially when we actually understand, like at a fundamental level, what they're meant to communicate. So thank you for bringing that up, brother. And that leads to the next thing. And you kind of touched on this, a commitment. Make
Mm.
small commitments to yourself. Commitment is just a dedication to a cause or an activity. So how do you build confidence in something that you feel you're not confident in? Exactly what you just said, Kofi. Find a way to do one thing that allows you to make a small, measurable step of progress towards the big trying to ultimately achieve. Something that I hear people bring up all the time is I'd like to wake up earlier. I hear that if I could wake up 1 or 2 hours earlier, I could basically, gain all this additional time back in my life, right? That
Yeah.
I'm right now snuggling in bed with my pillows and drooling all over. Well, if you're waking up at 7, you want to wake up at 5, probably too big of a leap, right? To make a commitment to just waking up. It's a whole 2-hour difference. But what happens if you set the alarm clock back just 15 minutes, right? So instead of waking up at 7, you're now waking up at 6:45. And you make the commitment to say, you know what? For the next couple of weeks, I'm just going to wake up 15 minutes earlier. And then what begins to happen is that's a smaller change to make that over those 2 weeks can compound to where
Yeah.
6:05 is now a piece of cake, and now you're backing it out to 6:30, and then 6:15, all the way to 5 a.m. over a window of time. You see, what happens for so many people is that they want to make too big of leaps
Yeah.
in windows that they literally exhaust themselves. It's like you're not even conditioned, right, over that short window of time to make that big of a leap. Whereas over a longer window of time, you could actually build up the conditioning to, over the course of time, not only stay in the game, but get to that desired outcome, that goal of 5 a.m. So I just really want to encourage people to think about some of these shifts in terms of becoming limitless over a more extended period of time. It's one of the things that Alex Ramosi talks a lot about this. He's like, I'm definitely here to make money. I'm just looking at it over a longer time horizon. This is something that I've been struggling with too, because when I got into this whole entrepreneurship space, what do you start doing? You start going on YouTube, watching videos, you start listening to podcasts, you start in the seminars, you start seeing people who are relatively in your age range accomplish all these things. So it subconsciously plants this seed that like you're somehow like out of the game and you've got to like make all this progress in a short amount of time to catch up, right? And I've just decided to kind of put that aside, because at the end of the day, we're all coming from different spaces. We all have literally different paths that we're walking, different lanes that we're running in. And what I begin to realize is like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, time is going to take care of time. It's always, I honestly feel like it's moving way too fast. And I've already fast forwarded out to like an 80-year-old version of myself where, God willing, I've accomplished everything that I've ever like desired and set out to accomplish. But the one thing that I am desiring is time back, because I now recognize that I'm much closer to the end of my life than I am the beginning of my life. And so that's how time works. Why are we in this crazy rush to speed it up? Why not play the long-term horizon game and be gracious enough to ourselves to make those incremental changes, understanding that if nothing else, it'll allow us the conditioning that is necessary to actually keep up and maintain the sustained changes that we hope to embody. So I just really want to pass that energy on to folks and hopefully impart that bit of perspective that can help with this limitless concept that we're working on integrating here today.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, I'm going to say it again. Consistency is key. Like that's really the long-term game there. And when you're able to, focus on, all right, how can I make progress? Like Atomic Habits. I love that book. 1% changes every single day. Like it's not about winning. It's not about getting that thing right away. And we all go through this, especially in the microwave society that we live in. But when you're able to really focus on that long-term game and say, all right, let me look at myself as my biggest, challenge. How can I do a little bit better than I did the day before? What can I do a little bit differently to just get, 1% better? Like that may be, hey, 5, 10, 15 minutes waking up earlier. It doesn't have to be this huge quantum leap. It can be a smaller, micro shift in order to get to that, goal ultimately down the road.
Love it. Let's bring this bad boy home, Kofi. I think the next one we got on our list here is control. Talk to us about control.
Ooh, control. Oh my gosh. I have, being an entrepreneur in my
Yeah.
past, I cannot tell you how many times in my life that I have wanted just full control over the outcome. And even in this last experience, right? I believe that, oftentimes like I have told myself a narrative of how I want something to go, how I want the next year to be, how I want this 6 months to go, how I want this date to be. And I realized what I was doing is I want to be able to control this situation. I want to be able to control the factors. And all that really leads to when you focus so much on the outcome really is disappointment. Because the reality is that you have to accept this just as a human. We don't really have control. That we are able to input into a system. We're able to do things to, hopefully some shift that outcome a bit, but ultimately there are so many other factors, especially if we're dealing with other humans, that we just don't have the ability to control and predict. So being able to let go of that sense of hey, I need this to be a certain way, I need this to happen at this certain time, that is so freeing. And it allows you or it's really allowed me to be more just more motivated and less anxious about stuff. Let me go out there and let's say I go to a bar, let me go out there and talk to a couple of different people, not necessarily thinking, hey, this next person I talk to has to become a friend or has to become a girlfriend. Let me just go out there and have a connection. I'm going to release myself from that outcome. Let me go out there and I'm going to make 5 sales calls, and I'm just going out there so I can build a relationship with somebody.
Yep.
Maybe that person that I'm calling, they become a partner 5-10 years from now. But releasing yourself from the outcome of all the things that we do is such a powerful thing. And I realize when I'm able to really be present and detach myself from what I really want that thing to become, it just makes things flow so much easier. You really let go of all that pressure that you put on yourself in any given
Yes.
situation.
Yes. This one takes me back to a previous book that we did, The Courage to be Disliked. And in that book,
Mm.
it's the separation of tasks.
Yes,
And
yeah.
person, what you'll understand, whether you believe in God like I do, or you call it the universe, but basically, if you're a spiritual person, what you'll probably agree with is that there is a divine intelligence, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there is a higher power that has a greater level of intelligence that ultimately governs the laws of the universe, which we do not have any control of,
Yeah.
right? But like that is God's task to
Mm-hmm.
basically, you know,
Orchestrate.
orchestrate the
Yeah.
design of life. Your task is to simply control your controllables, right? And wake up and show up and basically be a vehicle, be an instrument through which the divine God universe can use you to carry out what they've already intended. And when you can actually understand how those two tasks work in harmony, albeit separately, but collaboratively, and not try to over control over here and understand that you're supposed to just kind of do your thing over here, there is a beautiful flow that one can actually step into to where
Yeah.
things happen magically, almost effortlessly for you. I mean, the connections that I'm making out here right now, had I sat down and told myself I gotta do all this research and use my logical brain and try to drum up all these connections and how they're
Yeah.
all that would be madness. But to see how I go from one meeting to the next and it's like an effortless referral to this person. And I mean, for the purpose of this call, I'm not going to go too narrow and deep there. It really just speaks to my spirit that okay, I am supported, and I feel truly with all my being that we are all supported by God
Mm-hmm.
if we would just be willing to acknowledge that, to what you just said, we're actually not in control. And by acknowledging that, it gives us all the control that we need to focus on the things that are right within our hands and to carry those things through, understanding that the rest
Absolutely.
thereof. And that can be quite scary, can be
It
quite
can. It
relative to society programs and trains and conditions us. But again, there's an unlearning there that needs to happen. And for me, bro, it was as simple as reflecting back on times where I tried to over engineer an outcome or a situation and just being like, yeah, that failed. Yep, that felt
yeah.
this. Yep. Going, okay, I know what happens when I do that. I wonder, I wonder what could happen if I try it a different way. Again, that's that curiosity, folks, that we covered at the very first point. So you can kind of see how all this stuff starts to kind of like jive and work together. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'd be willing to try things a different way.
I love that.
Yeah, man. And that takes us to the last one, contribution.
Mm,
Uh, you know, what are we looking to give back to the greater good, right? What are we looking to create that ultimately makes life that much better for somebody else? I think that's a great asset or a great tool to whip out when we're struggling with like a limited way of thinking and we need to kind of like rise above to something that's more limitless.
yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I have definitely noticed like in our current society is that we are like everything is like telling us to focus on ourselves, right? Like self-awareness, like self-confidence, self-made, self-esteem. There's all these different like phrases that have really taken us away from the fact that like we're all in community and we're all like human beings. And like I know that like, say for example, you're starting off and you're like, you could be a journey as an entrepreneur, you could be going out there and trying to find your partner, but it's really easy to focus on the things that we will receive, right? Or like, man, like I need to get a client so I can build my business up and make some money, or I need to get this date so I can have a girlfriend and I can, you know, build a relationship, all these different things. And it's rare to really focus on saying like, hey, like I want to start this business so I can impact my community and make a difference in 1,000 people's lives. Or I want to take someone out on a date because I feel like I have something beautiful to share in my life. And I want to be able to allow that to spread to another person's soul and have them also experience, the goodness that I'm, going through or living through. But when you're able to change that mindset, I know for me, like, I think I gave this example when we were talking about the infinite game. But when I started my practice and I started, before like my company was like, hey, focus on, all these numbers, like how much money you can make the practice, how many clients you can bring in. But when I started focus on how I could actually make someone's life different by spending time with them and guiding them to better financial decisions, better financial tools out there, and what I was actually contributing, like I just felt so much more energized to go out there and do things. And on the back end of that, like I believe if you like disconnect fully from like contribution, it's very difficult to live a fulfilling life because nothing, like I realize for me particularly, like nothing I receive is gonna, like I can receive everything and I'm still not gonna be happy or satisfied. And that's not just because it's not because I don't have any level of satisfaction, but like I receive more fulfillment and happiness from actually giving. Like I love going out there and being able to talk to people and being able to spread ideas and being able to help someone go to another space or another place. And like really thinking about like if like great way to like do this is like say you get up every single day, take 2-3 minutes and think about how can I contribute to else's life today, or how can I contribute to a relationship that I have, what is something I can do, just unselfishly, just selflessly go out there and say, all right, like maybe it may just saying, hey Karl, you're an awesome person and I really appreciate being your friend. And that's a small way to contribute, but really focusing on others and focusing on how you can make, your community, your partner, the things you're working on just a little bit better, and taking that focus outside yourself is just such a magical way to approach life. And you feel like, I think it's just nearly impossible not to feel like happy and excited
Yeah.
when you're
Well,
building community around yourself in that way.
I completely agree. And again, it goes back to clarity. And what is
Mm-hmm.
clarity? It's the why. Like it goes back to what is the original design of possessing wealth? And if you look in the Bible and if you really like actually study it, what you'll find is that the original purpose of wealth is about influence,
Mm.
right? God created wealth, and the Bible is referred to as gold so that we could possess it, so that it would give us provision, so that it would give us providence. Like there's actually no shortage of wealth out there. And so in today's modern ecosystem, today's society, you know, in a world where we're all quote unquote chasing wealth, even though it's like something that's been created for us to have,
Yeah.
like we're going after the wealth. To your point, if you don't actually understand that the point of the wealth is so that you have influence over a greater group of people to where you can stand confidently in front of them and say, hey, look, listen, because I went on this journey and I created something that was of value and it allowed me to possess this wealth, you know, which is ultimately you providing a testimony of what's possible when people go out and they do great things, right? Like that's a testimony that sets them on their path to going out and creating wealth for themselves. Like without linking wealth to influencing people to go on their own journey, it is all done in vain. And
Yeah.
we've all heard of the mega wealthy that, you know, unfortunately lost the life to suicide or, you know, went down the path of drugs and alcohol. And we sit here and we go, man, like, but that guy or that woman had everything. Like, how is it that like they were,
Mm-hmm.
well, they never actually found a way to mobilize that wealth into influence to actually usher the next generation or the people just behind them to go out and do something of significance that could ultimately contribute to the greater good. So you see what I'm saying? It's about really understanding that wealth is really just an opportunity for people to go, oh, wow, what's the good that that person did? I want to listen and learn from that person because they found a way to provide so much value to the world that it allowed them to unlock this incredible flow of abundance
Mm-hmm.
that I want to go out and do the same thing too. And if we can do that in a very authentic, real, and genuine way, that's how you really start to mobilize people getting out of all this limited mindset and actually putting themselves in the game and going out and creating something that's going to make it a better place for all of us so that we can
Absolutely.
all tap God created for us, right? So ultimately, bro, like this is probably my favorite one. I'll be
Yeah.
honest. Favorite one. It's contribution. I've had enough nice things to know that it's not about the nice thing in and of itself. At some point, it just becomes another car to get from A to B. It's and I saw you post this with the skyline not too long ago. It's about like, wow, how does that little kid see that cool car and go,
Mm-hmm.
Thompson, like, how is it you have such a cool car? And then you can say something like, well, I try to go out every single day and help 1,000 people become financially free. And then that
Mm-hmm.
seed in that little kid's mind where he or she goes, wow, I want to figure out like what that mission is for me so that I can contribute at this level, so that I can have something like this, so that I can pay it forward and use this possession, not just to look cool, but to ultimately influence others and inspire others to go out on their path and
Yeah.
do their. That's the circle of a modest, not even a modest, an amazing and abundant life.
I
That's
love that. It's so true. And one thing I want to add on there is that like it doesn't really come down to where you're at on life in regards to how you can contribute. A lot of people sometimes feel like, hey, like I can't contribute until I get to this stage in my wealth, or I can't contribute because I don't have the, PhD yet, or all those different things. But there's someone that is struggling to complete or accomplish something that you have done already. And like, even if you're in fifth grade, right, you may have gone through fourth grade math recently, and there may be someone struggling, at a lower level trying to understand these different things. So, like, there's always something that you may know or you may understand. A lot of times we can like either discount our own knowledge or take it for granted, but there's always ways you can go out and contribute. And, even if, say, you may not have learned many things, you can even just contribute your time to like helping someone out, like it may be a friend moving or going and volunteering. But thinking, and like one thing I love doing is being grateful for the things I have, but then also thinking, okay, like what are the small ways that I can just whether it be like giving away a little bit of money or doing something small. Like the other day I was like, hey, I stopped, I saw a guy, I didn't have any money with me, but I had a water bottle. I was like, I'm just going to give you give you this because this is all I have this moment. But really, by focusing on those things, because we are communal animals, like we live in groups, and like ultimately and instinctually, the more things we do to help the group survive, like the better we feel about ourselves, overall. So I
Right.
agree with you, man. That contribution one, I feel like is such a powerful, such a powerful, tool right there. And remembering that we always have the ability to contribute no matter where we're at in life.
Well, there you have it, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen. This has been part two of Coffee Conversations with Karl and Kofi, part two of the Limitless Jim Quick book review. Man, I'm really liking this one because
dude.
there's so much practical application, and the way Quick talks, it really is easy to sort of digest these
Yeah,
things, arrive at a place where at least you can put yourself in the position of making a decision. And I think ultimately making the decision is the hardest part. But once you can do that, it's not even about being perfect. It's just about the fact that you've made a decision and you're going to show up every single day to try to honor that. I know that that's what I'm doing in my path. Something as simple as a decision to try to do one difficult thing every single day, or a decision to take time to meditate, or a
yeah,
decision to just learn something new over the course of time compounds. It may not seem like a lot in that moment, but at the end of the day, all we have is the moment. So you might as well do something that makes it a better
yeah.
moment. But Kofi, I'm going to give you the last words here, brother.
Awesome. Well, we are honestly, I'm a little bummed that we got to have the last video of the Limitless book wrap up this next week. But guys, it has been absolutely awesome. So we're going to be seeing you guys very soon here, wrapping up this book and then, diving into another one. And really recapping all these great pieces that, there's so much in this book. I know we won't be able to cover the entire thing, but this has been an absolutely awesome read. So we will see you guys soon on Coffee with Karl and Kofi.
Love y'all. Peace.